It's like if you look at Instagram pictures of a place, you're like, wow, I need to go there. And then you pull it up on All Trails and you're like, wow, that looks really terrible. Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
So today we're starting a new series. We're going to be talking about the Winds, which is an area in Wyoming. And we've kind of had our eye on this location for a little while now. It's just a place that doesn't require permits, I guess, to put it simply. There's so many places on the West Coast that we love going, but there are a lot of them that require really competitive permits. And this place, although it's maybe not the best location because you're not maybe so close to major cities, it just seemed like it was an option to have a really peaceful and beautiful experience. Now, at the time that we did this backpacking trip, we had been living in Washington just for the summer. Molly was doing a contract in Paulsbo, Washington, which is another story. But honestly, if you ever want to visit an absolute Hallmark town, you should go to Paulsbo. But anyway, while we were in Paulsbo, we had made some pretty big backpacking plans in the state of Washington. And of course, I had kind of been dragging my feet on these plans because I thought, well, these are going to require a lot of time and energy to think through the whole situation. But we were about a week out from when we thought we were going to start these backpacking trips. And so I finally buckled down. I figured out the route. I figured out the food we need. I had everything kind of figured out, a rough outline at least. And the very next day is when the fires started, naturally. So we decided to do what we seem to do best and pivot. We kind of discussed a couple different routes that we had seen that we kind of wanted to give a whirl. One was like the Sierra High route, but I think we decided that, Go ahead, Molly. Okay. She was going to say something, but then she did not. But
I was going to correct you and be like, it's not the Sierra High route, it's the Wind River High route. And then I realized you're talking about the routes that we were comparing.
Okay.
So I was not going to correct you, and now you forced me to do that.
Well, I mean, you didn't really correct me. You corrected yourself. So anyway, we kind of considered different areas. I mean, no place really was off the table for us because we were going to be in between contracts. So we had a little bit of time where we wanted to just spend it backpacking.
And we also looked at the Sawtooths, but there was also fires all around those mountains. So I don't know, nothing was off the table, but anything where there was active fires burning, we definitely weren't as interested in.
That's funny. I say nothing was off the table, except for all of our first choice backpacking trips because they were on fire and any other place that was on fire. So obviously those locations were out. But the Wind River High Route was one that I've been interested in for a while because I actually love to read the blog posts on Climber Kyle. It's just this amazing website of this guy who goes to just some of the most beautiful places. And honestly, I used to get really intimidated by blogs like that because I'd be like, oh, there's the things that I can never do. But we've actually done some of the routes that he has done. And anyway, so it was just kind of one of those things that piqued my interest in the Winds. So we decided that we were going to look into the Wind River High Route.
And even prior to hearing about the Winds from that blog, we'd heard about the Wind River Range 4 years earlier. We had made a trip to northern Washington to find an area with low wildfire smoke in a season of terrible smoke in 2020. And we actually ended up picking up a hitchhiker who was doing the Pacific Northwest Trail.
Sorry, Mom.
Yeah. And this was maybe the first hitchhiker we'd ever picked up, maybe?
No, we'd actually picked up someone that we knew that was hitchhiking before, but we didn't know that it was him until we picked him up. So this was our second time picking up a hitchhiker.
But the first time picking up a hitchhiker that we didn't know. And so this hiker, I think that had she been doing the CDT and then that's right.
She had been doing this insane route that was like the Yellowstone Caldera Rim route where you go like 1,000 or more miles on the Caldera Rim all the way around Yosemite. It was like circumnavigating Yellowstone, circumnavigating it. And it just sounded like this crazy trip where so much of it was off trail, but there were also a lot of people doing it. But in the Winds, she'd had to bail because they got a bunch of snow. And
I think that she said that maybe Pinedale was where she had to get off the trail because the snow was I think it had started to snow or more snow was coming, and it was just like, this is when you have to pull your plug on your hike. And so this was the end of September, and we met her, and she was just like, yeah, so I couldn't finish my hike on that other trail through the winds. So now here I am on the Pacific Northwest Trail, and I'm just going to be walking until it snows here, and I have to go somewhere else and do something else. Thus is the life of a thru hiker. So we thought, oh, the winds, that sounds so interesting, because she had mentioned how they were a highlight of this trail that she was on, and supposedly very rugged and very beautiful. But I don't even know if I'd seen a picture of the winds at all until we really ventured into them.
I mean, I guess I'd seen a few on Climber Kyle's page, but other than that, there really was not a ton of like photos, except for all trail photos, which we always say are like the least photogenic photos. Like if you ever want to look at a place and be like, this is the worst it could ever look, you look at the all trails photos. So basically that was kind of what we had seen.
It's like if you look at Instagram pictures of a place, you're like, wow, I need to go there. And then you pull it up on All Trails and you're like, wow, that looks really terrible.
So anyway, we decided that the place that made the most sense for us to finally get to go was the winds. And once we'd kind of wrapped our brain around the fact that we weren't going to do what we'd originally planned, we got really excited to go there. So there's a couple different routes that we were considering, because we wanted to do a high route through the winds. We kind of were like, this is going to be our one and done, because who knows when we'll have another chance to go. And the high route is just cool because it keeps you right up near the Continental Divide. And it just takes you through some really stunning scenery. Some of it's on trail and some of it's off trail. So there's two different routes that people mainly take. One is by Andrew Skurka, and one is by Alan Dixon. And we kind of decided that we were going to do the Skurka route because it keeps you more close to the true crest of the Continental Divide Trail. And it also just honestly looked like it went through some really, really cool and scenic areas. Plus, people always, if you want like bragging rights, I feel like the Skurka route is the one that people are like, that's the true route for true adventurers. So we decided we were going to do the Andrew Skurka route. And as we were driving from Washington to the hamlet of Du Bois, and yes, it is pronounced Du Bois. They had stickers that would be like, it is not Du Bois. But we were headed to the town of Du Bois. I just started to get really, really nervous. This was a huge route. It was very committing. And I think the thing that stressed me out the most was that the weather was not looking amazing for our week there. And the fact that it was kind of a tough route to bail on, where you're at like 13,000, 14,000 feet for a huge amount of the route. And you can't just easily bail down to like a lower trail just because so much of it is off route. I also was a little uncomfortable because we'd never actually been in the winds before. And so we had really no idea what the terrain was going to look like, how challenging it was going to be to navigate on that kind of terrain. Because like in the Pacific Northwest, it's so forested. It's like, I mean, that's a totally different option than kind of the expansiveness of the winds, which Molly and I would compare it very much to the Sierras with. It's very much granite and greenery. But it did almost feel a little more open even than the Sierras. Like I would say it was less forested. So we didn't know all of these variables. And so we ended up making it all the way to Du Bois. And this was kind of the funny part, was we had all of our stuff from living in Paulsbo. So Molly actually came up with a plan to store our stuff at what is that? Like just a storage place? Yeah. We literally...
Yeah, one of my tasks. So we, before we made our road trip to Du Bois, we decided to go through and, buy everything that we'd need. And we decided that to do the Wind River High Route, which was it about 90 miles or 100? Yeah. Something like that. We were going to take 10 days. So we had to acquire 10 days of food, and I think we had made some backpacking meals that we still had with us. So we had to collect everything, and we decided that we just really did not want to have to use bear cans to carry 10 days of food. So we did actually buy Ursacks, which we can talk more about that down the road. And so we'd gone through and acquired all this stuff. And then another project that I had was just the fact that we had a ton of our possessions, including bikes and all kinds of stuff.
Which by a ton, we just mean one car full, yeah. And it wasn't even packed to the ceiling, but way more stuff than it's you want to leave in your car at a trailhead for somewhere between 8 to 10 days.
Including an alpine rope for climbing, and crampons and ice axes and boots and bicycles and suitcases and an Instapot. So we had piled high the things in the vehicle, and I just thought, oh, do we want to park for 10 days at a trailhead and like have bikes on the back of our car? So I did some research, and there was a storage facility in Du Bois, and I, called them up, and they said sure. And so Carrie and I were able to show up and just meet the owner at the lot and get a key. And actually, no, we had to buy a lock. That's right. We didn't even realize that we needed to purchase one. So we had to go to like a local like hardware store, purchase a lock to put on our new storage unit, and then like shuffle things around out of the Jeep so that we could go park at the trailhead and not have to worry about having any issues with our belongings. Now that we'd offloaded all of our possessions to a storage unit, we were ready to get the rest of our gear together and do some last minute shopping.
So we went to the only store that they have in Du Bois. I don't know of what kind of a store it is, but it was just kind of a cute little family grocery store. And the thing that was really fun about it is Du Bois is a town that's on the Continental Divide Trail that spans from Canada to Mexico. And we were there in the middle of August, which is a pretty busy time for Wyoming. It's kind of like almost halfway on the trail. So whether they were people who had started in Mexico or Canada, we were seeing quite a few Continental Divide Trail hikers. We also call them CDT hikers. And inside the store, it was just fun because it was like we were shopping a little bit, and I looked and I was like, hey, I think that's like a thru hiker. You can always kind of tell because they got, they just don't care anymore. They're at this town, they're having a good time, and they're wearing their one outfit that they have, and it's probably been clean because they went to the laundromat. But, you can just tell who's a thru hiker and who isn't. And it was like fun because they were like congregating, and like you could tell there were people who had not seen each other for probably weeks, who were sort of like having surprise meetings in the store. I remember there was this one girl, she had on these shorts that were really cool. They were like pink and yellow. And she saw this other guy that was hiking who was wearing a basketball jersey. And she was like, oh my gosh, it's Beast. And I was like, oh, this is just fun to see these reunions happening here. Every aisle you're kind of watching to see what the thru hikers are choosing for their foods, And so that was kind of just a fun little time in the store. But then we got back to our little hotel room, and we were going to take a shuttle the next morning that was going to take us and drop us off to our starting point for the Wind River High Route. And I just felt like more and more unsettled and anxious about the trip. And I feel like we talk a lot about trips where maybe we felt a little bit anxious beforehand, but then we pushed through and it was good. But this was just kind of different. Like, I just genuinely did not feel comfortable with it, especially with how the forecast was kind of looking a little bit to be more in a stormy and like thunderstorm type of cycle, which again, you don't really want to be caught above, you don't want to be the highest thing around during a thunderstorm. And so finally I told Molly that I was really having second thoughts about doing the high route, and I didn't know if I wanted to do it, which obviously, we had our plans for the shuttle the next morning. We had everything kind of laid out, and I think that we kind of just did a lot of back and forth of like, okay, well, do you feel like this is like your normal, like, oh, I don't know if I want to do it, or do you feel like this is different? And it just kind of was like at a certain point at like, I don't know, 10 p.m. It felt like it was pretty late.
Well, and we would read through. So Andrew Skurka, he like gives kind of like descriptions for sections of the trail, and he'll kind of outline it. And I think that he uses some pretty descriptive words for different sections of the trail. And we started to feel, or at least I personally, as I did a little bit more research into it, having just been like occupying myself with like finding a storage unit and driving to Wyoming. So after I like sat down and kind of started to read some of the information, I was just like, oh wow, this could be a tad too committing for us, especially considering that we'd never been to the winds before. We weren't really familiar with the environment. There were storms on the horizon, and I think the high points in the Wind River Range are something around 13,000 feet. I think that Gannett Peak is the tallest peak in Wyoming, not Grand Teton. And I think Gannett is something in the 13,000s, but there were a couple I think 13,000 foot peaks that you summit as part of this high route, and then you're up at that 12,000 feet of elevation for a lot of it.
And it's kind of different from like the John Muir Trail because the summit's actually not really optional. It's like you go over the summit to reach the other side too. Because unlike, the John Muir Trail, you could always say, oh, well, I'm not going to do Mount Whitney if the weather's bad. I'll try to stay a little bit lower. But with this scenario, it's like, well, you kind of have to go onto the high passes and the high plains.
And I'm not remembering correctly if the actual high route was 90 miles or 100 miles, but then we started to be like, okay, so realistically, like if we need to bail, like where are our bailout points? Because there are certain areas of the high route that you could say are like a crux of the route. And one of them we were thinking of was Wind River Peak, which is like one of the very first things you do. We do it on like our second day. And so we're like, okay, well, if we have to go around this, then we have to add on like 7 more miles. And then, if we, like, there's an area of the trail where once you start to veer a little bit to the east, then you can't get back to the CDT. Like, you can't really cross over. Then you've just committed to being on that side of the trail for like the last 40 miles until you get back to your car. And we were thinking like, okay, like what if there is a pass in this area that's too much for us or the weather doesn't allow it? Then I'm like, oh, no problem. Like, we'll just then hop over to the CDT and then we'll have to hike up and like get a ride to Du Bois and then back to the trailhead. And then I was like, and actually,
are you going to tell the thing about the bikes?
Well, I was going to say that was going to add on like 30 extra miles.
Yeah. And then she was like, well, and this way, if we can just at least get a hitch to Du Bois, then we can just unlock the storage unit and ride our bikes from the storage unit, like 15 miles to the trailhead. And I'm like, this is starting to feel like a really extreme bailout plan that's almost maybe worse than the route itself. Because if you have to add, 40 miles of backpacking on just for your bailout, that's starting to feel not like a good equivalent. So we kind of came to this decision that...
Well, and I was still trying to figure out, like, okay, like, is it, like, how could we, like, give ourselves some confidence by, like, building in a buffer and, like, bailouts? And Carrie finally looked at me because I think our shuttle was supposed to be like 8 a.m. that we were going to get picked up from the trailhead? So we were going to have to leave the hotel at like 7 a.m. And Carrie was finally like, you know what, Molly, if we're still deliberating over it at like, I think it was like 9:30 or 10 p.m., I don't think we should do it.
Yeah. And that's honestly a hard decision to make. Like, I think we can make light of a lot of things that happen, but it is honestly hard to bail on something when you're right at the doorstep of doing it and you really want to do it. And honestly, I think, had there been certain factors that had been different, like had it been a perfect forecast, maybe we would have felt more comfortable, or had, all these different factors, maybe if one of them was different, maybe it would have been a different decision. But I think sometimes you can just look at it and say, okay, maybe I'm just saying no today, but it doesn't have to mean no forever.
And we've dabbled in little bits and pieces of off trail. If you've listened to many of our podcasts, you might have come across the Table 2 episodes, which was the very first time we did anything off trail. And then we'd done a little bit of off trail travel in the Glacier Peak area. And then obviously our bushwhacking on the Copper Ridge Loop. So we've done some, but like the Wind River High Route, the Skurka version it's like 60 miles or off trail. And so I don't know, personally, like if the weather forecast would have been better, that would have been good. But I really think we made a good decision to not do it this time, just because we needed to build our confidence and our skill set, just navigating off trail in the winds and just knowing what the Wind River range had for us. So as we're making this decision to, we're going to have to call the shuttle company first thing in the morning and that we've already paid for, to tell them like, no, we're actually not going to do the shuttle. And then we have to decide like, what do we actually want to do? Because now we're in Wyoming and all of our stuff is in storage. Then like the people like next door in our room started just like making all this ruckus, and it was just like such a devastating time, like having the death of a dream. And then like it was also just like super noisy, and we were just like, what is going on? Get us out of this hotel. But we're in Du Bois for the night, so I guess we'll stay there.
Yeah, and truthfully, I felt like you were like mad at me, and I don't know if you were mad at me, if you were just upset about the situation, but then I felt bad. And, so it's just like all these things that are real. That's real life, and we're real people with real emotions, and like we don't get to know how the story works out in the moment either.
And I was just frustrated because I really hadn't done any research because I was so used to just like, I don't know, a cushy life of Carrie doing a ton of research and like bringing me up to speed, telling me what I need to know. And then I just get to hike. It's like I have a guide service. And so I was just getting upset because like I was kind of mad that Carrie was feeling like it wasn't something we could do. But then when I started to take the time to really read the information, because we had like the maps and the route, but when I started reading more of the details, I started to feel like I didn't want to do it either. And then I was kind of upset that I had waited until like the night before to really do my own research and to feel that I didn't want to do it either.
Oh man, what a depressing episode. No, things do get better from here. So we went to bed, and then in the morning we were driving because we had decided randomly at some point.
Yeah, so we woke up. I had to call the shuttle service and be like, hey, we're not going to be taking your shuttle. And they were like, okay, cool. And then we were like, well, what do we do now?
So we came up with this plan kind of on the fly that we were going to backpack to the two most beautiful parts of the Wind River Range, and it was kind of annoying because it was still going to end up being like 60 miles, but it was just going to be two separate trips. And we wanted to do like a really long trip, but we were just kind of having to say, nope, it's fine. We're just going to do it that way. And as we were driving to go basically all the way around the Wind River Range, Molly all of a sudden was just like, I just think that I don't want to do these two backpacking trips. Like, I still want to do the longer distance. I still want to do that. And so then she was like, well, can we look at the other version, the Dixon version? Because, well, it still obviously is very challenging. It's not as long as the Skurka route, and it's honestly not quite as committing as the Skurka route because you actually start on the CDT and you start on the CDT and you kind of stay a little bit closer to it. So you have better bailout options. And so we kind of talked about it and discussed it together, and we were able to get a different shuttle that could take us to the different side of the range the next day. And so then we decided, you know what, this is what we're going to do now. We're pivoting. And so we decided we'd stay the night in Landers, Wyoming, which honestly, we stayed at a Holiday Inn there, right? Yeah. And that was like the best sleep of my life. We got there. Well, first of all, we got to Landers and it was like, well, now what are we going to do with this day? So we went and we got we had purchased some Hot Pockets to have for our first day meal on trail. And I'd warmed them up before we left Du Bois. So then we ate them at a park in Landers, Wyoming, which just felt so silly. But we enjoyed the sun. We met some really nice people from Wyoming who, like, honestly, they were just so friendly and kind. And they were, like, having a picnic, but they were just, like, visiting with us. And then...
and everyone is just so concerned that we meet. Everyone, like, the storage lady, the man in the park in Lander, like, everyone is just like... So you know about the grizzlies, right? And you have a lot of bear spray, right? And we're like, yes, we are familiar. We have bear spray. But at the same time, we've not ever actually hiked in grizzly country before.
Yeah. And so then after we're done with that, we check into our hotel and it was just like magnificent. The beds were so clean. Like it was so different from the hotel that we stayed at the night before. Like we weren't hearing all the noises in the whole entire hotel. And we just had such a nice day. We like separated our packs out because we knew that it was going to be a shorter trip so we could not dump, but get rid of some of the food, which was awesome. It's always awesome when you don't have to carry as much weight.
Which like instead of a 10-day trip, we were planning to do about 8. So, and we dumped enough food to make ourselves feel happy.
Hey, you know what?
And then actually brought enough to just be like, wow, we can actually have like fun things to eat now because we're not trying to like just cram 10 days of food into our packs. We can like bring like fun snacks. So like Pop-Tarts.
Yeah. So then after that, we had a nice swim at the pool. And then it was, of course, the Olympics. It was like, was it the last night of the Olympics or something? It was like one of the last nights of track and field. So we watched that really inspirational women's, like four women relay race with Sydney McLaughlin-Lavroni. Yeah. That was just like the best race ever to watch. And then we were like, okay, I just feel good about our plan, our insane plan that has just pivot. Like we're in a good space with each other and we're just excited to see what the winds have in store for us.
And what a emotional roller coaster from 24 hours before, like starting to realize like, we don't want to do this particular high route that we've been planning to do, to like having to deliberate what do we want to do, coming up with our plan of just like the shorter trips. Then on the drive, recognizing that we both really just wanted to make a footpath through the winds from like one point to another versus a loop. And then like, we're back on, baby. We're doing it. We're doing the Dixon High route now.
Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
If you want to see any photos or videos from what we talked about today, like us sitting in a park, you can follow
us dropping off our belongings at a storage unit.
You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Two Sisters on Adventures. And we're so excited to tell you all about our journey through the winds, especially now that we've gotten a little bit of this background out of the way. But we think it's important to just be honest and transparent that not every trip that you plan is just going to go exactly the way that you plan it. And that it's also okay to say, I don't think that this trip is for me right now. I remember I said to Molly at one point during our deliberations, because she was kind of like, well, we've already paid for the shuttle. And I was like, well, if we're out there on the high road and things are going south, we want to be like, well, it was all worth it because we'd already paid for the shuttle. You know what I mean? And so there are always those moments where you have to kind of debate that and make that decision for yourself. But fortunately, Molly and I are great adventure partners and we do support each other even when it's frustrating. So I hope you guys will tune in next week because we just had the best time in the winds. We met some great characters and honestly, it's beautiful country. So thanks so much, guys.
Bye.